What if the only way to find yourself was to lose, like, absolutely everything else?
Oh, well,
I
yeah.
mean, your family, your marriage, your very name,
Right.
and eventually, even the only pair of boots you have while you're standing completely alone on the steep edge of a California mountain.
That proposition kind of implies that our identities are mostly just made up of the things we cling to, you know?
Exactly.
Because when you systematically strip away every comfort, every safety net,
Yeah, all the external stuff.
right, all the external validators,
Yeah.
you're basically left staring into this very terrifying abyss. I mean, there was literally nothing left between you and the wilderness at that point.
And that terrifying abyss is exactly what we are wading into today.
Yeah, we really are.
So welcome to the Book Nook. Today we are immersing you in this just profound journey of self-discovery, doing a deep dive into the acclaimed memoir Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed.
Such an incredible piece of writing.
It really is. And, if you are joining us today thinking we're going to talk about, like, the best way to pitch a tent.
Or how to identify local flora and fauna.
Right. If that's what you're expecting, we need to reset those expectations immediately, because this isn't just a book about hiking.
No, not at all. I mean, calling Wild a book about hiking is kind of like calling Moby Dick a book about commercial fishing.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The physical journey is merely the vehicle for a much, much larger psychological excavation. We are going to examine the absolute limits of human endurance today.
Both emotional and physical, right?
Exactly. And more importantly, what happens when those two limits just forcefully collide?
Yeah. So our mission today for this deep dive is to explore how we reconstruct our identities when the absolute foundation of our lives crumbles beneath us.
It's so relevant for anyone, really.
Totally. We're going to look at the brutal, unromanticized realities of the trail, the key concepts driving her forward, and the transformative takeaways hidden out there in the wild.
But, to understand why someone chooses to walk 1,100 miles alone.
Yeah, that's not a normal Tuesday activity.
Right. We have to first look at the destruction of their previous life. People do not just wake up one morning, strap a massive, poorly packed backpack onto their shoulders, and march into the Mojave Desert without a really significant catalyst.
No, they don't. Because, the human brain is actually hardwired to avoid that kind of purposeless suffering.
It absolutely is. There has to be a driving force, right?
Yeah.
Like a psychological imperative that makes the extreme discomfort of the wilderness preferable to the comfort of civilization.
Yeah, and for Cheryl Strayed, that imperative was born from a profound, just world-shattering tragedy.
Her mother.
Her mother, yeah. Her mom died of lung cancer when Cheryl was just 22 years old.
Which is so incredibly young to lose a parent.
It really is. And we need to, contextualize the specific weight of that loss for you, the listener. Think about the central pillar of your own universe. For Cheryl, her mother wasn't just a parent. She was the gravitational pull that kept their entire family in orbit.
Right, because her father had been abusive and essentially abandoned her when she was 6.
Exactly. So her mother stepped into that vacuum, becoming both the sun and the earth for Cheryl, her brother, and her sister.
And when you lose that at 22, which is, an age where you are just beginning to calcify your own adult identity anyway.
Yeah, the gravity just simply vanishes.
It does. And the physiological and psychological response to that kind of loss is total destabilization.
Complete freefall.
Yeah. In the text, she provides this very haunting, specific time frame. She notes that it took her 4 years, 7 months, and 3 days to navigate her way out of the dense woods of her grief.
And let's be honest, she didn't navigate it gracefully.
No, not at all. When the mother died, the family unit immediately disintegrated.
Right, there's her stepfather, Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie, a man who had spent years helping build this off-grid life with her mother. But after she died, he morphed into someone totally unrecognizable. He just disconnected.
And her siblings scattered, too.
They did. Cheryl initially tried to, hold everyone together, playing the role of a matriarch, but the emotional burden was just unsustainable.
She was too young.
Exactly. So she eventually gave up and scattered as well.
And the way she scattered is a central focus of the narrative. She describes these 4+ years using this incredible analogy that I think it perfectly captures the mechanics of profound grief.
Oh, the sparkler analogy.
Yes, the 4th of July sparkler. She says that era of her life looked like a crackling sparkler. Her mother and their life in Minnesota was the bright, burning core.
Right, where all the energy is centralized.
Exactly. But when the core burns out, the sparks don't just, gently drift to the earth.
No, they violently, chaotically shoot off into the darkness in 1,000 different directions.
Yeah. Her mother was the core. When she was gone, Cheryl violently shot away from everything that grounded her.
And that violent trajectory manifested in some incredibly destructive behaviors. It wasn't a quiet, melancholic morning.
No, she was actively seeking out chaos.
She really was. She was married to a man named Paul, whom she describes as solid, sweet, and steadfast in his love.
He sounds like a genuinely good guy.
He does. Yet, she began systematically destroying that marriage through compulsive infidelity.
Was blowing it up.
Yeah, she started hopping from one meaningless job to the next, sleeping with men she barely knew, and eventually dabbling with heroin.
Which is wild. I always find it fascinating when grief manifests as self-sabotage like that. I mean, why blow up the one good thing you have left, right? Like a loving husband.
Well, it connects directly to the concept of control, and really the inability to tolerate stillness.
How so?
When a trauma like losing a mother occurs, it basically proves to the psyche that you have absolutely zero control over the most important things in your life.
Because the universe can just arbitrarily take your mom away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by cheating on her husband and doing heroin, Cheryl was manufacturing crises that she actually could control.
Oh, wow. If her life was going to fall apart, she was going to be the one tearing it down.
That's it, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, the agonizing stillness of grief is often just unbearable. Heroin provides a chemical numbness, while promiscuity provides a fleeting, intense dopamine hit.
So they're both mechanisms to avoid sitting in the silent, empty room of her reality?
Precisely.
The contrasts in her life phases leading up to this breaking point are just staggering when you lay them all out. I mean, think about where she started.
Right, in Minnesota.
Yeah, as a teenager, she lived a back-to-the-land existence in the Minnesota Northwoods. We are talking about a house with no indoor plumbing and no electricity, built by her mom and stepfather.
That's intense.
It is. Her mother planted these massive organic gardens, tapped trees for maple syrup, and made her own fabric dyes out of dandelions and broccoli leaves.
It's a deeply grounded, earthy existence. She was literally rooted in the soil, completely dependent on the rhythms of nature.
But then, from that off-grid life, she transitions into becoming like a popular high school cheerleader and homecoming queen.
Quite the pivot.
Right, and then she goes off to college and transforms again, this time into a left-wing feminist campus radical, immersing herself in literature and women's studies.
We want to be clear here, we're just reporting the phases of her life objectively, but it shows how wildly her identity swung.
Exactly. We're not taking sides on any political ideologies here. It's just a factual account of who she was at the time to show her evolution.
Right.
Because finally, after the tragedy, she ends up as this grieving waitress, separated from her husband, living in a dingy studio apartment in Minneapolis, basically staring up from the absolute bottom of a deep well.
And if we look closely at that sequence of identities, we uncover something pretty crucial about human adaptability.
Yeah.
While it might seem chaotic, those vastly different phases actually laid the psychological groundwork for her wilderness trek.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, she had already proven to herself that identity is malleable. She had, in her own words, been so many things already.
So reinventing herself wasn't a totally foreign concept.
Exactly. When you have successfully shed and adopted that many skins, from off-grid child to homecoming queen to campus radical to grieving addict making an extreme pivot to solo wilderness hiker, doesn't seem quite so impossible.
She had a proven track record of radical reinvention.
She really did.
So the big question for anyone who has experienced this kind of fragmentation, where your life feels like those scattered sparks in the dark, is how do you gather those pieces back together?
How do you reconstruct a self when the core is gone?
Right. And the book frames this struggle through a beautiful, albeit tragic, philosophical concept.
Ah, the 10,000 things.
Yes, 10,000 things. It's a phrase with roots in Taoism, generally used to describe the myriad things of the material and spiritual world, like the entirety of existence.
Right. And Cheryl writes that after her mother died, it took her years to take her place among the 10,000 things again.
That line always gets me.
It's powerful. The death shattered her connection to the physical world, to other humans, and to her own morality. She felt completely alienated from the fabric of existence.
So her journey is fundamentally about figuring out how to re-enter that fabric, how to exist among the living, and specifically, how to become the woman her mother actually raised.
And the method she chooses to re-enter the world of the living begins in, honestly, the most mundane, corporate environment imaginable.
It's so funny how that happens.
We transition from this existential crisis in a Minneapolis apartment to the literal conception of the journey. Where is she? She's standing in line at an REI.
An outdoor retail store.
Exactly. The contrast between the profundity of her grief and the sterility of a retail checkout line is striking, but, it's often how life works. Epiphanies rarely happen on mountaintops.
No, they usually happen while you're waiting to buy something ordinary.
Like a foldable shovel.
Yes. She is waiting to buy a foldable shovel. And while she's standing there, she just casually picks up a guidebook from a nearby shelf.
And that book is The Pacific Crest Trail, Volume 1, California.
She flips it over, reads the back cover, and traces the jagged line on the map with her finger. It's this continuous wilderness trail running from the Mexican border in California, snaking up through 9 mountain ranges across Oregon and Washington to just beyond the Canadian border.
Stretching 2,663 miles.
It's immense.
In literary terms, we'd call this the inciting incident. But psychologically, it's a classic geographic cure.
Right, the idea that if I just move, my problems will disappear.
Exactly. There's this deep-seated human impulse that suggests if we change our geography, we can change our internal state. When she traces that line on the map, she isn't just looking at a trail.
What is she looking at?
She is looking at a structured path out of her chaos. The PCT offers something her life in Minneapolis severely lacks. A singular, undeniable direction.
North. That's so profound. So she decides she's going to walk it. She aims to cover as much of it as she can in about 100 days.
Which is a wildly ambitious proposition.
Especially because the Pacific Crest Trail wasn't a real place to her yet. It was just an abstract idea. But she latches onto it with this fierce intensity. The preparation just becomes an obsession.
Obsession is definitely the right word. She buys the guidebook and stays up reading it all night. And over the next few months, she reads it dozens of times.
While her personal life continues to completely fracture.
Right. She gets an abortion. She finalizes her divorce. She is simultaneously grounding herself in the extreme minutia of survival preparation.
Like learning how to make dehydrated turkey jerky.
And tuna flakes. She takes a refresher course on basic first aid. She literally practices pumping her water purifier in her kitchen sink.
I think anyone who has gone through a period of intense anxiety can totally relate to this. The preparation is a coping mechanism.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't control the fact that your mother is dead, but you can control exactly how many ounces of iodine you pack.
And she is very clear about her intentions here. Her goal wasn't to go into the woods to become a new person.
Right.
Her goal was to strip away the chaos of the last 4 years and get back to the person she used to be. The strong, responsible, clear-eyed woman her mother raised.
She is utilizing the wilderness as an abrasive.
That's a great word for it.
She wants the trail to scour away the cheating, the heroin, the apathy, and reveal the ethical core that she knows is buried underneath all that grime.
By studying the maps and dehydrating the food, she is seizing agency. Her life had been dictated by loss. Now she is dictating the terms of her own survival.
Which brings us to a really pivotal moment before she even sets foot on the dirt.
The name change.
Yes. Finalizing her divorce with Paul meant losing her hyphenated married name. But she felt utterly disconnected from her maiden name, her high school identity.
She just wasn't that girl anymore.
Right, and pretending she was would be a lie. So she decides to search the dictionary for a new last name, and she lands on the word Strayed.
Cheryl Strayed. It is a profound declaration of self.
It is, but I have to pause and push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because as a reader, and maybe for you listening right now, there is a cynical part of the brain that flares up here.
Sure.
We are talking about doing the hard, brutal work of healing and reconstructing an authentic identity. Doesn't picking a name out of the dictionary feel a bit, fraudulent?
I can see that.
It borders on the theatrical. It's like putting on a costume and declaring yourself a new character rather than actually doing the internal work.
That skepticism is totally warranted. I mean, changing your name to something symbolic sounds exactly like the kind of performative reinvention people attempt when they want to avoid real growth.
Right, like naming yourself Star or something.
Exactly. But we have to examine the specific word she chose and the definitions she attached to it. She didn't choose a name like Phoenix to symbolize rising from the ashes, or strong to project resilience.
That's true.
She chose a word that defined her failure and her loss.
She actually lists the dictionary definitions in the text, and reading them is kind of chilling.
What were they again?
Let me pull it up. It says, to wander from the proper path, to deviate from the direct course, to be lost, to become wild, to be without a mother or father, to be without a home, to move about aimlessly in search of something, to diverge or digress.
See, when you look at those definitions, it fundamentally reframes the act. The dictionary was essentially reflecting her exact biography back at her.
It really was.
This wasn't an act of romanticizing her journey or inventing a shiny, idealized persona. She wasn't denying the darkness of her past 4 years. She was institutionalizing it.
She recognized that she was astray.
Yes. By legally taking that name, she was, as she beautifully puts it, planting a root in the very center of her rootlessness.
Planting a root in the center of her rootlessness, that implies a really deep level of self-acceptance.
It does.
She is saying, I am lost, I am orphaned, I have deviated from the path, and that is exactly who I'm going to be moving forward.
And it changes the tone of the scene where she says goodbye to Paul in the snow in Minneapolis.
Yeah, when he calls her Cheryl Strayed for the first time.
There's a heavy finality to it. The old life is legally and symbolically dead. The stray is heading into the woods.
But of course, the transition from the conceptual idea of being wild to the physical reality of the wilderness is where her romanticized vision violently collapses.
Rebranding yourself in a city apartment is entirely different from surviving with that new identity in the elements.
Oh, absolutely. The wilderness immediately tests whether Cheryl Strayed is a resilient person or just a poetic costume she put on to feel better.
Which brings us to the brutal reality of the trail. The physical wilderness versus the emotional wilderness.
She begins her hike in the Mojave Desert in California, and her expectations immediately clash with a horrific physical reality.
Because her initial expectations were heavily skewed by the modern concept of, like, a spiritual retreat.
We've all seen this narrative, right?
Oh, everywhere. The protagonist goes into nature, sits by a pristine lake, and spends their days weeping tears of cathartic sorrow while pondering the heavy, devastating questions of their life.
Cheryl thought she was going to hike through the desert meditating on why her mother died.
Why she destroyed her marriage.
Why she turned to heroin. She anticipated this deep, intellectual and emotional excavation.
Instead, she finds herself in pure, blinding, all-consuming physical agony.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about her backpack.
Yes, monster.
She packed so much unnecessary gear into it that she physically couldn't lift it off the ground from a standing position.
Which is insane for an 1,100-mile hike.
Right. She has to sit down, strap it on, and awkwardly roll onto her hands and knees just to stand up.
It's almost comical until you realize the damage it's doing.
She names the pack Monster, and it becomes this absurd hulking companion, literally digging deep, bloody grooves into her hips and shoulders.
The physics of carrying a poorly packed, overweight bag are brutal on the human skeleton. It changes your center of gravity, strains your lower back, and puts immense downward pressure on your feet.
And she is doing this in the Mojave Desert.
The heat she experiences isn't just uncomfortable. She describes it as a sound.
A dissonant keen.
A dissonant keen, with her head at the very center. It's an impressive physical force. By day 10, she is literally moaning out loud as she walks.
The physical toll is horrifying. Her feet are blistered and rubbed raw. She is resting in the meager shade of these scraggly desert bushes, fantasizing in intricate, obsessive detail about cold water.
Her focus narrows entirely. I mean, by the time she loses her boots weeks later, 4 of her toenails have blackened and completely detached themselves from the nail beds, just due to the constant bruising friction of walking downhill with a heavy pack.
It's hard to even read. She reaches a breaking point early on where she desperately wants to quit. She wants to hike to a nearby road, hitchhike to a bus station, and just run away to Alaska.
And her entire motivation for Alaska is simply that there's ice there.
Exactly. The high-minded philosophy of her journey is stripped away in a matter of days, replaced by a primal need for temperature regulation.
This presents a really fascinating paradox, though.
What's that?
If she went out there to excavate her trauma and process her grief, but she spends her entire time obsessing over blisters, water scarcity, and the weight of her pack, did the wilderness fail her?
See, that is exactly what I found myself asking. Did she fail her own mission?
It seems like it. Right.
Yeah. Is Monster, this impossibly heavy backpack, just a literal physical manifestation of her emotional baggage? Is she just dragging her problems around in the dirt, suffering pointlessly instead of actually dealing with them?
It's a great question. But the neuroscience and psychology of trauma actually offer a counterintuitive answer here.
Okay, lay it on me.
The intense physical suffering was not a distraction from her healing. It was the necessary mechanism for it. Think about the hierarchy of human needs. When you are sitting comfortably in an apartment, your brain has the bandwidth to ruminate on existential grief, regret, and complex trauma.
Right. Your mind just spins.
The prefrontal cortex spins endlessly. But when you are thrust into radical aloneness and sheer, overwhelming physical agony, your physiological survival mechanisms override everything else.
So her body essentially forced her brain to shut up about the emotional pain.
Precisely. The acute physical stress floods the brain with cortisol and endorphins, and the amygdala shifts your focus entirely to immediate survival.
Water, shade, moving one foot in front of the other.
Yes. By focusing entirely on surviving the heat, managing the literal open wounds on her hips, and enduring the excruciating pain in her feet, her emotional suffering was unexpectedly muted.
It's a literal forced reset of the nervous system.
Exactly.
She notes at the end of the second week that she hasn't shed a single tear since she began the hike. Her wildly complicated, messy life had been made astoundingly simple.
The physical crucible was silencing the emotional chaos.
You can't rebuild a foundation until you clear away the rubble, and the pain of the trail was burning that rubble away.
It totally eclipses the emotional trauma. The physical pain is so loud that the grief just has to sit quietly in the corner.
That makes so much sense.
And as she pushes through this initial physical barrier, we enter a new phase of the journey. Once her body begins to adapt, or at least accept the baseline of pain, her perception of the world shifts.
Right.
The isolation sets the stage for profound, fleeting encounters with other human beings.
She notes that the radical aloneness altered her sense of self. Before the trail, alone felt like a room she retreated to, a confined space of isolation. But out on the Pacific Crest Trail, alone stopped being a room and became the whole wide world. The vastness of it changes how she interacts with the few people she does meet.
Because when you are that isolated, a simple conversation with a stranger takes on immense weight. It becomes the vital tether to humanity.
There is this incredible interaction she has at the Kennedy Meadows General Store that perfectly encapsulates this.
Oh, with the woman studying birds?
Yes. She meets a woman there who is brushing her teeth in the bathroom. They strike up a conversation, and the woman explains that her ex-partner was an ornithologist who specialized in corvidology.
Which is the study of ravens and crows.
Exactly. And during this casual conversation, the woman looks at Cheryl and notes that the raven is traditionally a symbol of the void.
And Cheryl's initial reaction is disappointment.
Yeah, she hears the word void and feels crestfallen. Culturally, we associate the void with emptiness, darkness, depression, the abyss.
It sounds like the very thing Cheryl's trying to escape.
Right, but the woman flips the definition entirely. She explains that in certain contexts, the void is actually a positive force. It is the place where things are born.
She compares it to a black hole in space that absorbs surrounding energy, compresses it, and eventually releases it as something totally new and alive.
The metaphor of the black hole is incredibly apt for what Cheryl is experiencing. Think about the listener sitting at home right now.
Yeah, we all encounter voids in our lives.
When the kids move out and the house is suddenly quiet, that is a void. When a long-term relationship ends and your weekends are suddenly empty, that is a void.
And society tells us we must immediately fill those voids with distractions, hobbies, or new relationships. We are terrified of the empty space.
But the trail is teaching Cheryl to just sit in it. The Pacific Crest Trail itself acts as the ultimate void. It is acting exactly like that black hole.
Think about what the trail is absorbing from her.
It's absorbing her grief, her physical pain, her blackened toenails, her sweat, her exhaustion, and the terrible guilt over the mistakes she made in her marriage.
It is pulling all of that destructive energy into its gravity. And the implicit promise of the void is that eventually it will release her at the end of the trail as someone entirely new.
As she walks deeper into this void, her defenses continue to drop, and she starts having these unprompted moments of deep reflection. The things she valued in civilization begin to shift.
Like our mother's reading habits.
Yes. This detail really grounds the story in universal family dynamics. She remembers the books her mother read when they first moved onto their land in the early 1980s.
They were very practical, everyday books.
Titles like Double Yoga, Bread Baking Basics, The Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening, and later on, a massive James Michener novel, Texas.
And as a college student immersed in feminist theory and classic literature, Cheryl had been incredibly dismissive of her mother's reading material.
She exhibited that classic intellectual arrogance that often accompanies higher education.
She was absolutely snobbish about it. She actually told her mother that Michener wasn't a real book, implying it wasn't serious literature worth her time.
Which is so harsh.
It is. And her mother's response is one of the most heartbreakingly gracious things in the book. Her mother lightly swats her arm and says that her time has never been worth all that much anyway, since she'd never made more than minimum wage and usually slaved away for free.
Oof. It's a quiet, devastating acknowledgement of parental sacrifice.
It really is. The mother sacrificed her own intellectual pursuits, her own potential, to build a life for her children.
And out on the trail, carrying the physical weight of her own survival, Cheryl's perspective on this dramatically shifts.
She had actually taken those books after her mother died.
Yeah, and stripped of her collegiate pretense and forced into the dirt, those books become precious to her. The trail just burns away her arrogance.
The wilderness has a way of leveling everything.
Speaking of the trail's environment, she also has this profound realization about the founders of the PCT. You know, men like Clinton Clark and Warren Rogers, who envisioned this continuous path winding from Mexico to Canada back in the 1930s.
She realizes that when they fought to create this trail, they were imagining people exactly like her.
Right. And they certainly weren't imagining the high-tech gear of the 1990s or her specific brand of hiking boots or the modern ultralight hiking philosophies that obsess over base weights.
No, they didn't care about her water purifier or her dehydrated tuna flakes.
What drove the founders, and what ultimately drives Cheryl onward during the most miserable, painful days, is a timeless human experience.
She realizes the trail has nothing to do with efficiently getting from point A to point B.
No, it has only to do with what it feels like to be a human being existing in the wild. To witness the slow, deliberate accumulation of trees and meadows, mountains and deserts, rivers and rocks.
The accumulation of trees. That phrase is a masterclass in understanding how healing actually works.
How so?
You do not heal all at once. There is no single epiphany that cures grief. You heal step by step, tree by tree, mile by mile.
It is a slow, rhythmic accumulation of distance between you and the trauma.
Exactly. And the people she meets along the way, like the Corvidology woman or a hiker named Spider with his turquoise ring or a man named Dave and his dog Stevie Ray, they act as these brief waypoints.
They reinforce her independence, but they remind her that she is still woven into the human fabric as she walks through the void.
Which brings us to the absolute summit of her journey.
Yes, the
Right.
climax.
We've traversed the physical agony, the psychological shifts, the encounters in the void. All of these elements culminate in a massive emotional breakthrough that brings us right back to the provocative hook we started with.
By mid-July, she is miles from civilization in every direction. She sits down on a steep, rocky slope to rest.
She takes her boots off to give her battered feet a moment to breathe.
And then disaster strikes. Her massive backpack monster topples over
It hits her left boot.
and sends it catapulting into the air. It bounces off a rocky outcropping and disappears into the lush, impenetrable forest canopy far below.
It is completely irretrievable.
The shock of that moment is just palpable. She is 38 days deep into the wilderness. She knows intellectually that anything can happen out there, but when the single most vital piece of equipment you own vanishes over a cliff, the terror is paralyzing.
Most people would panic. They would scream. They would try to climb down the dangerous slope. They would despair.
I would definitely panic.
But her reaction is deeply revealing of how the trail has changed her. She clutches the remaining right boot to her chest for a moment. But then she realizes the harsh, objective truth of her situation.
What is one boot without the other?
It's useless. An orphan,
Yeah.
just like her.
So she fully embraces the madness of her reality. She lifts that heavy brown leather boot high into the air and throws it with all her might, watching it fall into the trees and out of her life forever.
It is the ultimate act of surrender. Throwing the second boot isn't just accepting her physical reality, it is accepting her emotional reality.
She is alone. She is barefoot on a mountain. She is an orphan.
She cannot control what the mountain takes from her.
Yeah.
And there is only one option left.
To keep walking.
Yeah.
To head toward the Bridge of the Gods in Oregon, wearing cheap, knockoff sandals held together with duct tape.
There's a moment shortly after this where she catches a ride to bypass a section of trail due to heavy snow.
And the driver cheerfully tells her that they are only 200 miles from the Oregon border.
Her internal reaction to that phrase is fascinating. She refuses to let those words exist in the same sentence. Only and 200 miles.
Because her perception of distance and effort has been radically altered by the wilderness. To a person driving a car, 200 miles is 3 hours listening to the radio with the air conditioning on.
Right. To Cheryl, whose feet are bleeding and duct taped, every single week on the trail has been a grueling crucible. 200 miles is an eternity of blisters, heat, and survival.
But that crucible has finally done its work. The physical stripping away of her defenses has reached the emotional core. The calluses on her feet have hardened, but the calluses on her heart have finally softened.
Which leads directly to her emotional breakdown around day 50.
She is looking out over the darkening land, and her thoughts unexpectedly turn to her father. Not her mother, the loss that sent her spiraling into chaos, but her father.
The man who abandoned her when she was 6.
She describes him in the text as a shadow beast in the woods, a fire so far away it's nothing but smoke.
This highlights an incredibly important psychological reality. Often, the trauma we think we are running from is actually masking an even deeper, older wound.
The death of her mother was the acute trauma, but the abandonment by her father was the chronic trauma that fundamentally shaped her belief that she was unworthy of being loved properly.
She realizes that of all the wild, dangerous things she has encountered on the trail, the bears, the relentless heat, the rattlesnakes, the sheer drops, his failure to love her the way a father should have had always been the wildest, most untamed thing of all.
But in that moment, gazing out over the vast expanse of the PCT, she has a profound epiphany. She realizes she doesn't have to be amazed by his failure anymore. There are so many other amazing, beautiful things in the world to direct her energy toward.
And that realization is the key turning the lock. That is when the dam breaks.
The tears finally come. After 50 days of silence, they open up inside her like a river. She laughs with the joy of it, and then she cries and cries.
But she makes a very specific distinction. She notes that she wasn't crying because she was sad, and she wasn't crying because she was happy.
She was crying because she could finally breathe.
The trail had systematically dismantled the heavy armor she had worn for years. It was a release of the psychological pressure valve that had been building since she was 6 years old, compounded by the death of her mother and her own destructive marriage.
Here is where the metaphor of the journey perfectly aligns with her internal state. The trail often felt to her like one continuous, impossible ascent, like she was always stubbornly dragging herself up the side of a mountain.
Yet geographically, her final destination was heading down toward a river, the Columbia River, at the Bridge of the Gods.
Was the concept of wild ever really about the physical landscape of the PCT, or was the wild always about this confrontation with the untamed parts of her own history?
You cannot separate the two. They are symbiotic. The wild was absolutely the untamed, unpredictable nature of her trauma. Her father's abandonment, her mother's sudden death, her own destructive impulses, those were the wild elements of her internal life.
But the physical wilderness of the PCT was the mandatory crucible required to strip away her defenses.
The trail battered her physical body so thoroughly that her ego and her defensive walls completely collapsed. She couldn't hide behind heroin or promiscuity or intellectual snobbery out there.
She was forced to look at the wildest thing of all, her unloved inner child, and simply let it go.
The brutal physical ascent of the mountains perfectly mirrored her agonizing emotional climb out of the deep well of her grief.
We've traversed the mountains with Cheryl, we've thrown the boots off the cliff, we've sat in the void, and we've reached the river.
We made it.
So why does the story matter so much, and who really benefits from absorbing it?
It matters immensely because it completely dismantles the modern, polished, self-help cliché that healing is a serene, meditative process.
We are often sold the idea that finding yourself involves bubble baths, positive affirmations, and visualizing success.
There is zero toxic positivity on the Pacific Crest Trail.
Exactly. Wild proves that real healing is often brutal. It is sweaty, it involves blackened toenails and open wounds, and it requires walking directly through the center of your pain rather than trying to meditate your way around it.
This narrative is essential for anyone who feels unmoored in their life right now. If you are carrying your own monster backpack of grief or regret or unresolved trauma...
I feel like a stray.
Yes, if you feel like a stray, the story is a reminder that sometimes the only way out of the dark woods is to walk straight through them. Blisters, lost boots, and all.
For me, the ultimate takeaway is about the necessity of surrender. You don't necessarily need to hike 1,100 miles from the Mojave Desert to the Bridge of the Gods to find yourself.
Right. Not everyone has to do that.
But you absolutely have to be willing to sit in the void of your own life. You have to be willing to endure the discomfort of being alone with your own mind without reaching for a distraction.
You have to be willing to let go of the things you cannot control, even if those things feel as vital to your survival as your own hiking boots.
You have to allow the void to absorb your pain, stop fighting the gravitational pull of your grief, and trust that the process will eventually release you as something entirely new and alive.
Beautifully said.
Well, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the wild, make sure to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss an episode.
We explore the most impactful narratives in personal growth, psychology, and literature because we believe that examining these profound human experiences can fundamentally change the trajectory of your own life.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book, article, or topic you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.
Most really do.
As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one last lingering idea to mull over. The next time you lose something important in your life, whether it's an opportunity you desperately wanted, a relationship you thought would last forever, or just a metaphorical boot falling off the side of a steep mountain, ask yourself, what is the universe forcing you to walk toward barefoot?